Hello guys and welcome back. As you can see, we're at the Newcastle United training ground where we've just been at Eddie Howe's pre-match press conference ahead of that Aston Villa game tomorrow, the Premier League opener. First of all, Dom, we'll start on injuries. What's the latest?
Yeah, there was quite a bit given away by Eddie Howe today. He spoke about Fabian Schär, who I said in our previous video I didn't expect him to start. Thought Jamal Lascelles would start in his place. Fabian Schär's obviously missed quite a bit of training, missed the last 3 pre-season games, but Eddie Howe said he's trained well in the build-up to the game, and made me look a bit daft, but he could be involved. As it stands, he expects him to be involved, so we'll wait and see on that when the team news drops tomorrow afternoon. But that was a big one, an injury boost for Newcastle if you like. But the 2 players who will miss the game, Joe Willock and Emil Kraft, not so positive injury news. Eddie Howe confirmed it's pretty much a setback for Joe Willock. He's still looking at least another month on the sidelines. He said he wouldn't be back till the international break, which, taking into account he injured his hamstring in that Brighton game the back end of May last season, you're looking at 3-4 months out for Joe Willock. So blow for him. And then Emil Kraft obviously been out pushing a year now with an ACL injury. He said 4 to 6 weeks until he returns to training, so you could add another couple of weeks on that before he's even back in the first team picture. But a boost in terms of they've brought the right back in Tino Livramento, and I know I'm sick of talking about Tino Livramento. I've spoken about him a lot, but Eddie Howe did speak about him, Jordan, and said what he could bring to the side.
Yeah, called him a very exciting signing, very athletic, touched upon sort of playing left back. I think he did say he could play there, but ultimately will be a sort of a rotation with Kieran Trippier. Reading between the lines of what Eddie Howe said, I don't think Livramento will be asked to make an instant impact. Sort of spoke about his knee injury that he's had at Southampton, and will need time to get over that. He is fully fit, he is training, but as with that sort of kind of injury, it does require a little bit of time, so he will be eased in here at Newcastle. The style of play at Newcastle play, the high intensity, it's going to ask a lot of Livramento, so he will be given time. So as you can see, we've got a different backdrop here. We have been asked to leave Newcastle United's training centre. To be fair, it was our fault, we were over time, so we've came to the Benton Quarry car park, which is just outside the training ground. A lovely little backdrop there, I'm sure you'll agree. But talk about Tino Livramento, Dom, obviously Newcastle's latest signing. Where do you think Newcastle will go next, and what did Eddie Howe say on transfers?
Yeah, Eddie Howe gave a little bit away on transfers. He spoke last week, he wants 2 more signings, Tino Livramento being one of them, and he said he'd love 1 more signing. And where that is, what position that is, we understand potentially a centre-back. Eddie Howe didn't really address that at all, but he said the last signing they will have to be creative with, and whether that means bringing in a player on loan or getting a structured deal or a obligation to buy, something like that in terms of a loan obligation to buy next summer, that's something they will explore. And Eddie Howe was saying 1 more signing they'd love to make. And moving on though, Villa tomorrow. You asked some questions, Jordan, to Eddie Howe. What sort of answers did you get from him, and what did you say?
Yeah, I certainly got longer answers than I did last week. 3 very quick questions last week. But first of all, I asked about Emil Kraft, which we've obviously already touched upon. 4 to 6 weeks for him until he returns to training. But on that as well, we spoke to Sean Longstaff at the Amazon Premier last week, and he spoke about more people wanting to tear Newcastle down this season. So I put that comment to Eddie Howe, and he challenges players to use it as motivation. Newcastle will face different challenges this season. They aren't a surprise package anymore, if you like. People are coming to St James's Park, will set up differently, will play against Newcastle in different ways. So Newcastle need to find ways to find ways to win and deal with the challenges of teams, as Sean Longstaff described it, of tearing them down. So yeah, Eddie Howe wants to use that as motivation, as he does with many other things as well, which I'm sure what stays in the dressing room will stay internally. But he did give a little bit of insight there as to what motivations Newcastle are using this season. But in terms of your questions, Dom, take it away.
Yeah, I was interested to get Eddie Howe's thoughts on the added stoppage times, the sort of new regulations where, like we saw in the World Cup, games lasting potentially with all the added time over 100 minutes on a regular basis, and we saw that in the Charity Shield final last week. Eddie Howe's team obviously known for the gamesmanship. Eddie Howe didn't give much away on that. He just said we'll all do it. But he did say he has concerns over the sort of player well-being side of things, where Newcastle playing in 4 competitions this season. If games are adding up to 100 plus minutes every week, by the end of the season that really adds up and could be like almost the equivalent of 5 extra games by the end of the season. So Eddie Howe's said he's uncomfortable with that and the added stress he has on the player, or it could have on the players. But he said he understands the fact that it's a rule or a sort of guideline being introduced that will help the flow of the game. It'll hopefully prevent time wasting and things like that, and for a spectator sport will hopefully improve things moving forward. And just moving on, I asked him about showing loyalty to the players. Obviously last season he was very loyal to the players who helped him in a relegation battle. We saw Sven Botman, big signing made last summer. He didn't actually start the season. He went with Dan Burn, Fabian Schär, and Matt Targett, Kieran Trippier. So, and we saw Bruno sort of introduced slowly as well after he signed. So I said, to what degree are you showing loyalty towards your players? He said you have to consider that, but he takes it on a game by game basis. He didn't give us an awful lot. It wasn't the best question in the world, but he said he'd take into account players' fitness and what will be required to win any given game. And then on the back of that, I said, you spent 120 million on new players, and I'd argue none of them walk into the first team, whereas 2 years ago, if you sign a 50 odd million midfielder, he's pretty much a guaranteed starter, whereas now you're 4th in the Premier League, you're in the Champions League. How strong is the squad looking now? And Eddie Howe, he was just sort of like, it would be foolish of him to make decisions based on, oh, this player we've brought in for a lot of money, he has to start. Again, on the back of my previous question, he just sort of said, yeah, we make decisions best for the game, player fitness. And I thought he did almost give a little bit of a hint away on the fact that he will ease the new signings into things, where he said his process is he gives players a period to settle in, and then do they play their way into the team. He didn't say anyone would start the game. He said these new signings will be given a chance to play their way into the team. So we'll see that, see how things unfold at Aston Villa, or at St James's Park against Aston Villa tomorrow evening, and we'll be there, joined by our fellow Geordie journo Liam Kennedy. So we'll see you all there tomorrow.